It was just one message, but everything changed after that. I used to think that loneliness was something that only happened to people who didn't have anyone. You know, the ones who eat dinner alone, who don't get messages on their birthdays, who never have to clear a spot on the couch because it's always empty. But I learned that you can be surrounded by people, live with someone for years, and still feel invisible. I guess that's what started happening to me long before I realized it. Tom and I had been together for almost 7 years. We weren't married, not officially, but we lived like it. Shared bills, shared space, shared silence. In the beginning, everything was easy, that kind of easy that makes you think you've finally found your person. He used to leave notes on the fridge, stupid little things like don't forget your coffee or you look beautiful even when you're late. I used to laugh at them, roll my eyes, but secretly I loved every single one. Then, slowly, they stopped. No notes, no random texts in the middle of the day, no just thinking of you. I told myself it was normal, that relationships fade into routine, that it wasn't a big deal. I was busy too, working long hours at the marketing firm, trying to prove to a boss who didn't even know my name that I was worth keeping around. Every day felt like running on a treadmill, moving but not getting anywhere. And every night, when I came home, Tom was there, but not really there. We didn't fight. That was the strange part. We just stopped talking. Like two actors who forgot their lines but kept pretending the play was still going. I'd cook, he'd eat, we'd sit in front of the TV, scrolling on our phones until one of us said, "I'm tired," and that was it. I used to think silence was peaceful, but this kind of silence, it's like a fog that seeps into your chest and makes it hard to breathe. One night, I remember looking at him while he was asleep and feeling absolutely nothing. Not love, not hate, not sadness, just this cold, quiet emptiness. And that scared me more than any argument ever could. I started wondering if this was it. If this was all my life would be, quiet dinners, empty mornings, meaningless smiles. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment something inside me began to crack. When people talk about things falling apart, they make it sound sudden, like one big event that shatters everything. But it's not like that. It's slower, quieter. It's when you stop waiting for messages. When you stop caring if they look at you when you talk. When you stop trying to fix what's broken because you can't even tell where it broke. That's how it started for me, not with a scream, not with a fight, but with silence. And maybe, deep down, I was already preparing myself to leave. It started with a message. Nothing dramatic, nothing out of the ordinary, just a simple, "Hey, long time no see." It was from Daniel, an old friend from university. We used to be close, that easy kind of close where you could sit for hours and talk about nothing and somehow it still meant everything. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I moved in with Tom and life became a long list of responsibilities instead of moments. I remember staring at the message longer than I should have. There was nothing flirtatious about it, but I felt something flicker inside me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Curiosity, maybe. Or nostalgia. Or maybe just the reminder that someone, somewhere, still thought of me. I typed back, "Hey, yeah, it's been forever. How are you?" And just like that, a door I didn't even know was still there creaked open. We started chatting. At first, it was just small talk of work, mutual friends, stupid jokes about how we were getting old. But then, little by little, the messages grew longer, later, more personal. He'd ask how I was really doing, and I'd say, "Fine," because that's what you say when you don't know where to start. But he didn't just accept that. He'd write, "No, really. How are you?" And that stopped me every time, because I couldn't remember the last time anyone had asked me that and actually meant it. Tom never asked. He'd come home, complain about work, eat in silence, fall asleep with his phone in hand. If I was quiet, he didn't notice. If I cried in the shower, he didn't hear. But Daniel noticed everything, even through a screen. He remembered little details I mentioned, my favorite coffee shop, how I hated Mondays, how I used to draw but hadn't picked up a pencil in years. And the more he remembered, the more I wanted to tell him. I started waiting for his messages. That tiny buzz of my phone became the highlight of my day. I'd smile at my screen and feel guilty the moment I realized it. Because it wasn't supposed to feel like that. It wasn't supposed to matter. But it did. And suddenly, I was staying up late again, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I didn't want the conversations to end. One night, he wrote, "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" I froze. Because yes, I had thought about it, too many times. But admitting it felt like betrayal. So I wrote back, "Sometimes." Just that one word. And somehow, it said everything. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him. About us, or whatever this was becoming. I told myself it was harmless, that people are allowed to talk, that loneliness makes you do stupid things. But deep down, I knew what I was doing. I was reaching for something I'd already lost at home. And maybe that was the real problem, not Daniel, not Tom, not even me. Maybe it was the silence that left space for someone else to walk in. For a while, I convinced myself that what I was doing wasn't wrong. We were just talking, that's what I told myself every time I saw his name light up my screen. I wasn't lying to Tom, not really. I wasn't sneaking around, I wasn't meeting Daniel, I wasn't doing anything physical. But sometimes the things you don't do hurt more than the things you do. The messages became part of my routine, like coffee in the morning or brushing my teeth before bed. Only difference was, the more I messaged him, the less I spoke to Tom. I'd come home, ask how his day was, get a one-word answer, and stop trying. We'd sit there, the TV filling the silence between us. And I'd scroll through my phone under the table, pretending to check work emails while waiting for Daniel's next message. He made me laugh again, really laugh, the kind that comes out before you can stop it. He remembered how I used to snort when I laughed too hard. He told me that was one of the things he missed about me. And my stomach twisted in a way I didn't want to think too hard about. Then one night, he asked if I wanted to meet. Just coffee, he said. Just to catch up, nothing weird. And I almost said yes. But then I saw Tom's shoes by the door. And for a second I felt this wave of shame so strong it made my throat tighten. I turned off my phone and sat there in the dark for a while, listening to the sound of the refrigerator hum, feeling like I'd already crossed a line I couldn't see but knew existed. The next day, Daniel didn't message me. Not in the morning, not during lunch, not after work. And it was ridiculous how much that hurt. It was like someone turned off the only light in a dark room. And suddenly, I realized how much I'd come to depend on that light to see myself. Tom came home early that day. And for the first time in months, I actually looked at him. He looked tired, older somehow. His face lit by the glow of his phone screen like always. And I wondered if he felt it too, the distance, the disconnect. The way we'd become polite strangers sharing rent. I wanted to ask, are you happy? But I didn't, because I was afraid of the answer. Maybe he would have said yes. And that would have made me the only one who wasn't. That night, Daniel finally texted, sorry, rough day. I didn't mean to disappear. And just like that, all the guilt I'd been drowning in melted away for a moment. Replaced by that stupid warmth I'd been craving. I typed back, it's okay. I was just worried. And as soon as I hit send, I hated myself for it. Because it wasn't okay. None of it was. And I wasn't just worried. I was hooked. It happened by accident. At least, that's what I told myself. I was walking home from work, scrolling through my phone, when Daniel called. He never called. We always just messaged. For a second, I froze, my thumb hovered over the screen, heart pounding like I'd been caught doing something wrong. Then I answered. His voice was exactly as I remembered, warm, calm, familiar. Hey, he said. You sound surprised. I wasn't expecting a call, I laughed, trying to sound casual. Well, texting felt too slow today, he said. And somehow that one sentence felt like a spark in dry grass. We talked as I walked home, about work, about music, about the stupid weather. It felt natural, effortless. By the time I reached my building, I didn't want to hang up. He said, I'm actually nearby. Do you have time for a quick coffee? I hesitated, staring at the front door like it was a line drawn in sand. My voice said yes before my brain could say no. He was waiting at a cafe around the corner. It wasn't romantic, just two people sitting across from each other, talking like old friends. But everything about it felt dangerous. The way his eyes lingered when I laughed. The way he leaned forward when I spoke. The way my heart raced for reasons I couldn't admit. We sat there for maybe an hour, maybe two, I honestly don't remember. When I finally stood to leave, he smiled and said, you look happy. It's nice to see that again. I smiled back, but the moment I stepped outside, the air felt heavier. I walked home fast, guilt pressing on my chest like a weight. Tom was on the couch when I got in, eyes on the TV, dinner already half eaten. He barely looked up when I walked in. Hey, he said. Hey, I replied. That was it. And suddenly, the guilt started to fade, replaced by something colder, resentment. Because here I was, feeling guilty for wanting to feel something. While the man I lived with didn't even notice I was gone. That night, I lay in bed next to him, scrolling through my messages. Daniel had texted, I'm glad we met. It felt right. I stared at it for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. I could have ignored it. I should have ignored it. But instead, I typed, yeah. It did. And when I hit send, I knew exactly what I had just done. After that, it was like the dam broke. We talked constantly. Inside jokes, secrets, tiny pieces of ourselves we hadn't shared in years. I told him things I hadn't even told Tom. Sometimes he'd send a song, or a photo, or a voice note. And I'd feel that pull again, stronger every time. But the more real it felt, the more I started to panic. Because I couldn't live in two worlds forever. And deep down, I knew something had to give. I started living in fragments. Half of me belonged to Tom, the version of me that paid bills, cooked dinner, kept things running. The other half lived inside my phone, inside messages, inside a world that felt more alive than the one I actually lived in. I told myself I could manage both, that I wasn't hurting anyone. But guilt has a way of catching up to you, slow at first, then all at once. Tom began to notice things. Not the big things, not the lies, not the messages. The small things. The way I smiled at my phone. The way I started wearing makeup again for no reason. The way I pulled my hand back when he tried to touch me. He didn't say anything, not right away. But silence can speak louder than any argument. One night, he finally asked, is there someone else? The words hung in the air like smoke. I didn't answer right away, maybe because I didn't have an answer that would make sense. I could have said no and technically been right. But the silence between us said otherwise. He laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that comes from humor. It was sharp, bitter, like something inside him had snapped. Of course, he said quietly. You don't even have to say it. He didn't yell, didn't accuse. He just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to memorize the person I'd become. And in that moment, I realized I'd already lost him, not because I cheated. But because somewhere along the way, I stopped choosing him. After that night, we barely spoke. He started coming home later. Sometimes he wouldn't come home at all. The apartment began to feel smaller, colder, even though there was less of him in it. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how something so ordinary could collapse so completely. Daniel noticed, of course. He'd text things like, you sound tired, or you don't seem like yourself lately. I'd tell him I was fine, the same lie I'd told Tom 1,000 times before. But even with Daniel, something started to shift. The excitement that once felt electric began to feel heavy, complicated. He wanted more time, more attention, more of me. And I didn't know if I had anything left to give. One Friday, after another long week of pretending, Daniel asked if I wanted to get away for the weekend. Just us. No stress. No pretending, he said. It was tempting, the idea of escaping everything, of pressing pause on my life. But reality doesn't stop just because you run from it. Still, I said yes. That weekend was the first time in months I felt alive. We laughed, we drank too much wine, we talked about everything and nothing. For 48 hours, it felt like the world outside didn't exist. But then Sunday came, and reality was waiting for me at the door. When I got home, Tom wasn't there. His closet was half empty. No note, no message, just silence. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I felt hollow. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and suddenly realized I didn't know how to exhale anymore. That night, I texted Daniel, he's gone. He replied almost instantly, then maybe it's finally time for you to be happy. But instead of relief, all I felt was a quiet kind of terror. Because I wasn't sure I even knew what happiness meant anymore. The first night alone felt strange. I thought it would feel freeing, the way movies make it look, when someone finally walks away from a life that doesn't fit anymore. You imagine yourself cooking dinner in peace, sleeping diagonally on the bed, listening to your favorite music without judgment. But it wasn't like that. It was too quiet. Too still. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed louder without Tom's soft snoring beside me. At first, I tried to convince myself that this was progress. That endings are supposed to hurt, that pain means growth, that I was finally living for myself again. But the truth was, I didn't know who myself even was anymore. For years, I had been half of something, half of a relationship, half of a routine, half of a person. Now I was supposed to be whole, and I didn't know how. Daniel tried to fill the silence. He called every night, sent long messages about how we could finally be together, how we didn't have to hide anymore. He said he'd been waiting for this moment, that we could start fresh, that it was our chance. And I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something about the way he said we made me feel trapped again. Like I'd just traded one version of dependence for another. He wanted to come over the next day, but I told him I needed time. He said he understood, but his messages came every hour anyway. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? Do you miss me? And for the first time, those questions didn't make me feel seen. They made me feel watched. I realized I hadn't been honest with him either. What I wanted from Daniel was never a new beginning, it was escape. He had been a door out of a life I didn't know how to leave. But when I finally walked through it, I didn't find love waiting on the other side. I found myself, and I didn't like what I saw. I stopped answering his messages for a day. Then two. He showed up outside my apartment once, said he was worried, said he missed me. We talked, but it didn't feel the same. The easy laughter, the spark, the excitement, all gone, replaced by awkward pauses and too many I'm sorry yes. He asked if I regretted what we had. I said no. But I think we both knew it was a lie. After he left, I sat on the floor and cried. Not for him, not for Tom, but for everything in between. For all the things I had broken trying to fix myself. For all the people I had hurt without meaning to. And for the part of me that still didn't know what it meant to be happy. The next morning, I looked in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes looked tired, but her face was calm, like she'd stopped pretending. And for the first time, I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't check for messages. I just stood there, letting the silence settle around me. Maybe freedom isn't about starting over. Maybe it's about sitting with the mess you made and finally admitting that it's yours. It's strange how quiet rock bottom can be. There's no dramatic music, no sudden collapse, just a stillness that creeps into everything. Days blurred together, and for the first time in years, there was no one to text, no one to cook for, no one expecting me to show up. Just me, and the noise inside my head. I started avoiding mirrors. Every time I caught my reflection, I'd see someone I didn't recognize, someone who looked fine on the outside but felt hollow underneath. I tried to fill the silence with distractions. I watched shows I didn't care about, scrolled through endless feeds, poured too much wine at night just to feel something. But nothing worked. The silence always came back, louder than before. Then one night, I found an old box under the bed. Inside were photos, notes, things from when Tom and I still believed in forever. A concert ticket. A postcard from a trip we never took. A photo of us laughing so hard that my face was turned away from the camera. I stared at it for a long time, trying to remember what it felt like to be that person. Not the woman who betrayed, not the one who left, but the one who still believed in something simple, love that didn't need fixing. I broke down then, really broke down. Not the quiet tears I'd been shedding for months, but the kind that rip your chest open. All the anger, guilt, and confusion I'd been holding back came crashing down at once. I cried for Tom, for Daniel, for the woman I used to be, and the woman I'd become trying to please everyone except myself. At some point, I called my sister. We hadn't spoken in ages, not because we'd fought, but because I'd drifted from everyone who knew me before all this. When she answered, I couldn't even speak. She just listened as I tried to explain everything, the silence, the affair, the loneliness. When I finally stopped talking, she said something I'll never forget. Maybe you were never looking for someone else. Maybe you were just looking for you. That sentence hit harder than anything anyone had ever said to me. Because it was true. All this time, I'd been running from myself, using people, relationships, attention, just to avoid sitting with my own emptiness. I blamed Tom for being distant, blamed Daniel for wanting too much, blamed life for being unfair. But the truth was simpler. I was lost long before any of them came along. The next morning, I woke up early, no alarm, no reason. The sun was barely up, and the city felt quiet in a way it never had before. I made coffee, opened the window, and for once, didn't feel the need to check my phone. I didn't know what was coming next. I just knew I didn't want to keep living half a life. That morning, I decided to stop chasing things that only left me emptier. To stop needing someone to fill the silence. To finally face it myself. It's funny how, after everything collapses, life still goes on. The world doesn't pause for your heartbreak. The city still hums, people still laugh in coffee shops, the mail still comes every morning. I used to hate that, the way the world could be so indifferent while mine was falling apart. But after a while, I started to find comfort in it. Because if life goes on, maybe I could too. The first few weeks after everything ended were strange. I didn't talk to Daniel anymore. He tried a few times, left messages, asked if we could talk things through. But I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't reopen wounds. I didn't hate him, I couldn't. He'd shown me something I needed to see, even if it came at the wrong time, in the wrong way. I focused on small things, cleaning the apartment, buying fresh flowers, cooking just for myself. It sounds trivial. But those tiny acts started to stitch something back together inside me. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was performing for someone. No pretending, no measuring my worth through someone else's eyes. Just being. Sometimes I'd think about Tom. Not in the angry, guilt-soaked way I used to, but with quiet understanding. He'd loved me the only way he knew how. And maybe that wasn't enough. But maybe I hadn't made it easy for him either. We both failed each other, not because we didn't care, but because we stopped trying to understand. One evening, I found myself walking through the park we used to visit on weekends. It was almost sunset, and everything was bathed in that soft orange light that makes the world look gentler than it is. I sat on a bench and just watched people, couples, kids, old men feeding birds. And I realized I wasn't sad. Not happy, not healed, but peaceful. Like I'd finally stopped fighting the idea that things could have been different. When I got home, I opened my sketchbook for the first time in years. The pages were yellowed at the edges, untouched since the time before all this. I picked up a pencil and started to draw, nothing fancy, just shapes, lines, a face that looked almost like mine but not quite. I lost track of time. By the time I looked up, it was midnight, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel empty. I felt present. Maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting, not moving on. But learning to live with the parts of yourself you tried to ignore. The loneliness, the guilt, the mess, all of it. You carry it, but it doesn't crush you anymore. And that night, as I turned off the light, I whispered something I hadn't said in years. I'm okay. And for once, I actually meant it. Time passed differently after that. It didn't drag anymore, but it didn't rush either. Days began to find their rhythm again, coffee in the morning, music playing softly in the background, the hum of normal life filling the empty spaces that used to ache. I stopped counting the days since everything fell apart. It didn't feel like waiting anymore, it felt like living. Work became easier too. Not because it changed, but because I did. I stopped trying to impress everyone. Stopped volunteering for every impossible project just to feel needed. I did what I could, went home when the day was done, and left the rest at the office. It was strange at first, how quiet my life had become without all the chaos. But I started to like the quiet again. This time, it didn't suffocate me. It felt earned. One morning, I ran into Tom on the street. It had been months. He looked good. Older, maybe, but calmer. He smiled when he saw me, that same polite smile people wear when they don't know what to say. We talked for a few minutes, small talk about work, about the weather, about how strange it was to run into each other like that. Then he said, "You seem different." And I said, "I am." It wasn't awkward, not really. There was a kind of peace in knowing that some things end, and it's okay. No bitterness, no blame, just two people who once shared a life, now sharing a quiet moment before walking separate ways again. That night, I thought about what he said. "You seem different." I realized that he was right, but not for the reasons I'd imagined. I wasn't stronger or wiser, I was simply more honest. With others, but mostly with myself. I stopped chasing the version of me who had everything figured out. Instead, I started trusting the one who was still learning. I reconnected with old friends, not all at once, but slowly. One lunch turned into two, one message into long conversations. It was strange how easily they welcomed me back, no questions, no judgment. They just said, "We missed you," and somehow, that simple sentence felt like forgiveness. Sometimes I'd walk through the city and catch glimpses of my old life. The cafe where I met Daniel, the corner where Tom used to wait for me after work. It used to sting, but now it didn't. It was just part of the map of my life, roads I'd taken, some right, some wrong, but all leading here. I wasn't in love. I wasn't searching for anyone new. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a failure. It felt like space to breathe, to grow, to be. Maybe that's what healing really is, not finding someone who makes you whole. But realizing you were never broken beyond repair. It's strange how endings never really feel like endings when they happen. You expect fireworks, tears, some kind of closure, but in reality, it's quieter. You just wake up one morning, make your coffee, look out the window. And realize you don't ache anymore. The wound is still there, but it doesn't bleed when you touch it. I moved apartments a few months later. Not far, just enough to feel like a new beginning. The new place was smaller, brighter, filled with plants I wasn't sure I could keep alive. There were still nights when the silence felt heavy. But now I didn't run from it. I'd light a candle, put on music, and let the quiet be what it was, not an enemy, not a punishment, just space. Sometimes I'd think about Daniel. Not with anger, not with longing, just curiosity. I wondered if he ever thought about me. If he ever realized that what we had was never meant to last. It wasn't love, it was two lonely people finding warmth in each other's shadows. I don't regret it anymore. Without him, I might never have realized how lost I really was. And Tom, sometimes his name still echoes in the back of my mind. Not because I miss him, but because he's a part of who I was. There are days when I pass by someone who looks like him. And for a moment, I almost smile. Not because I want him back. But because I finally understand that not all love is meant to last forever. Some are meant to teach us what it means to let go. One weekend, I took a trip by myself. No plans, no destination, just me, a small suitcase, and a train ticket to somewhere quiet. It was the first time I'd ever done something like that alone. The countryside rolled by outside the window. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running away. I was just going. Existing. When the train stopped, I stepped out and felt the wind on my face. Cool, soft, carrying that scent of earth and rain that feels like memory. I didn't take any photos. I didn't text anyone to tell them where I was. I just stood there, breathing. And realized that I finally belonged to myself again. Healing isn't about going back to who you were before everything fell apart. It's about meeting the person who survived. The one who learned to live without constant noise. Who forgave herself for the choices she made when she didn't know better. Who stopped mistaking attention for love, and comfort for connection. I don't know what comes next, maybe love, maybe solitude, maybe something in between. But for the first time in a long time, that uncertainty doesn't scare me. Because I've learned that sometimes, peace isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just waking up. Making coffee. And knowing that this quiet, imperfect life is finally mine.